This is another episode of Conservative Conversations with your hosts, Reid and Frank. How are you today, Frank?
I'm doing pretty well, I'd have to say. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. Also, can't complain too much. It's getting a little hot out as summer comes around.
Yes, it is warm. I set out just to have a cigarette and I'm sweating by the end of it.
Well, you know how I can also tell it's getting hot out?
How's that?
My electric bill's going up, that's how.
That sounds about right.
Nope. But listeners, we got a couple updates for you today. And we're going to start with our most recent one, is the Supreme Court case regarding the cheerleader we talked about in our last episode. And the Supreme Court decided 8-1 in the cheerleader's favor. And sort of a brief summary of what they decided is that there are some cases where schools can regulate student speech while off campus, but in this particular case, it wasn't warranted. So that's partly why they decided in the students' favor. And Frank is going to read a few quotes that we have pulled from a couple articles about what the justices wrote regarding their decisions.
Okay, so Justice Stephen Breyer penned the majority opinion, and in it he was stating things like, let's see, that it might be tempting to dismiss the student's words as unworthy of the robust First Amendment protections discussed, but sometimes it's necessary to protect the superfluous in order to preserve the necessary. Instead, he stated that while public schools may have a special interest in regulating some off-campus student speech, the special interests offered by the school were not sufficient to overcome the girls' interest in free expression in the case. Breyer wrote that there were 3 features of off-campus speech by students that affected a school's ability to regulate it, as opposed to speech on school grounds. The first feature he detailed is that a school rarely stands in loco parentis, which is a Latin phrase that means in the place of the parent, when a student is off campus. The second feature is that schools have a heavy burden, quote unquote, to justify regulating speech off campus, since they otherwise would technically be able to intervene in what a student says during the full 24-hour day. The third feature, Breyer wrote, is that as nurseries of democracy, quote unquote, schools should have an interest in protecting unpopular expression, especially when the expression takes place off campus. But interestingly, Thomas, as the only dissenter, wrote that the majority fails to consider whether schools often will have more authority, not less, to discipline students who transmit speech through social media. Thomas explained that since speech made through social media can be seen and shared on campus, it often will have a greater proximate tendency to harm the school environment than will an off-campus in-person conversation. He also wrote that the majority failed to explain why it breaks from a prior rule that schools can regulate off-campus speech so long as it has a proximate tendency to harm the school, its faculty or students, or its programs. The foundation of the majority's ruling is untethered from anything stable, Thomas wrote, and courts and schools will almost certainly be at a loss as to what exactly the court's opinion today means. So definitely interesting there, and I found in the first article that you referred me to on this matter, there was a small note at the bottom of it where it said that Thomas contends that the school could be harmed by the student, by the student's words and the attention garnered. So he found that the school could justly punish as a deterrent, which I thought was kind of interesting. But, I don't remember the particular way we hashed this on the last recording, but I don't find it a huge shock that they sided with the cheerleader. Do you?
No, I think in general, as it was sort of pointed out, and like in this particular case, the girl in her post didn't even specifically mention the school, so they didn't have a whole lot of claim that they were being harmed. And I think since they have sort of ruled narrowly, sort of regarding just to this case, I think we're likely to see more similar cases probably come up in the future. Because I think it's sort of like Thomas pointed out, since there doesn't seem to be a line drawn, there probably have to be another case until we figure out where where the line is, when a school can and cannot, censor or regulate a student's speech while off campus, one, and two, from a social media post.
Right. Definitely some interesting nuance to this case.
Yep, I think so. And one of the things I saw, and I remember we kind of talked about this in the last episode, we had wondered, like, who was the first person to sort of make that decision to suspend her from the cheer team.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that it was originally the coach had done so after another teammate had shown the post to the coach. And I think, I'm pretty sure I've said this last time too, that it wasn't necessarily wrong for the coach to punish her. I think, maybe saying, you have to set out the next game or next, meet, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
That, I think that would have been an acceptable punishment. But I believe it was a whole year, and just for a teenager doing what teenagers often do, especially nowadays with social media. So I think there is a lot of, like you said, nuance to this case that, can be discussed and played out this way and played out that way.
Well, and I think, one of the real things here, the real rub, if you will, is it was just at the end of the day a girl blowing off some steam about, what was bothering her in regards to school and her failure to make the varsity team. Surely the adults involved would know that this would blow over. So I don't understand why a particular teacher or particular members of the school board or whatever, the principal, a bunch of adults, I don't see why they couldn't just get over it and realize that a teenager cussing on social media is like anybody else spitting into the wind. It dissipates over time.
Right. So we'll see. I'm glad the case came to a resolution, and we were able to follow up on it like we said we would.
Yeah, and I find it interesting too. The girl, the cheerleader in the case, was interviewed, and she said basically the same thing, that she was glad that it was over. And as I recall, she seemed to have some quip about how she feels good that now students can, express themselves without fear of coming into school the next day and being punished for it.
Right, yeah, I think that's good.
We'll see where it leads.
Sure. And then I believe you have a few other topics that we can provide follow-ups and updates on that we discussed in prior episodes.
Yeah, quite a few, honestly. We've made several predictions and had lots of interesting conversations on this channel where, we don't always seem to follow up. We're a very news forward place, and we're always reading what's happening today, what's happening next week, what's coming down the pike. So I happen to sit down and spend a good fair amount of time listening to some of our older episodes. And I think the first one that really stands out to me would be the episode that we called Sloppy New Year, because that was where we really made a bunch of New Year predictions. We had a new year, new administration, some big changes, and we predicted where that might lead us. So one of the first predictions that I had made was that we would see a lot more of Barack and Michelle Obama. And now, being 6 months out from when we made this prediction, if you were to go back and listen to the audio, I said that we'd be seeing them, almost daily, and that the news media would be constantly parading them around, that they'd basically be on air every morning, noon, and night. And while we have seen a fair bit of Barack, I don't think that it really fit in the same way that I predicted that it would be. It seems more like they trot out Obama anytime they have a real big flop, with some push that they've made, towards a new legislation or some scandal that's happened. It seems that they just trot out Obama to just say, "Oh, nothing to see here. I still support Biden." You know, um, I don't feel that I've seen him as much as I thought I would have.
No, it seems like they bring him out every now and then when they're trying to push a certain talking point. I just saw him on some clip recently, and I don't even know what he was talking about because I didn't really watch the clip. I watched somebody else talking about the clip, but I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, he definitely comes out every now and then. I don't hear that much from Michelle as compared to Barack.
Right. Well, the only thing I have to add on that bit is just to remind that it's only been 6 months, and who knows, we may still see more of them yet. But it really hasn't been to the effect that I imagined when I made this prediction.
Right. Well, I guess we can make try to come up with another prediction on top of that. Off air, you and I were talking a little bit, and we were talking about these updates that we have, and one of the other ones, maybe we'll just kind of lead right into it, is regarding Joe Biden's health. And one of the things you pointed out was that not a whole lot of people seem too happy or thrilled or excited about Kamala Harris. So I wonder, maybe as she, either continues to be as terrible as she is or gets even more terrible and people don't have high favorability ratings for her, if we'll push Obama out more often to help cover more for Joe Biden.
Certainly interesting. I know that he was one of her biggest backers. When she made her independent run, back at the primary time, when she was running on her
Mm-hmm.
own. So yeah, I could see that. I definitely see how you tie it in with the other thing. But she really has been doing a terrible job, with this border thing, and while Joe Biden's health, doesn't seem to be deteriorating or anything, and God bless him,
Mm-hmm.
his mind seems just as clouded. I don't know, just as he seems just as crazy as ever. I'm sure you've heard, mostly because we already mentioned it, but he's had this latest whispering outburst where he's whispering to the reporters and he's whispering to the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny, as I told you, but I'll tell the listeners as well. There was a segment on Fox News where Jason Chaffetz was interviewed about it, and it's so comical. He leans into the camera. I don't think he even expected to do it, because he ends up cracking himself up. But he leans into the camera right as Sean Hannity, sets him up. He says, and here's Jason Chaffetz, and he's going to give us his opinion. And he asks him, he says, well, Jason, why is Biden acting like this? What's it mean? And Chaffetz, the pickup is with him leaned real close to the camera, and he says, it's creepy.
Yesterday at the White House, he was acting a little odd. Watch.
Employers can't find workers. I said, yeah, pay them more. This is an employees bargaining chip now. What's happening? I got them $1.9 trillion relief so far. They're going to be getting checks in the mail that are consequential this week for child care. The bill on the environment. Why would I not be for it?
Joining us now with reaction is Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Jason, the whisper, what do you think here?
It's very creepy. I can't believe it. It's just weird. I mean, come
on. So, who knows about his health? As far as predictions and making more predictions, that's one where I still feel, not that I'm wishing for it, but I gave him 2 years from inauguration, and I don't see why that shouldn't still track. That would still be my prediction.
Yeah, physically, he might still be in pretty good health, but it's almost like every week a little more.
Well, and you just have to wonder what the Democrats are thinking. I mean, because there have even been calls from within their party for him to undergo a mental health evaluation. And, of course, there was all that talk, about the 25th Amendment and everything. And now you just have to wonder who on earth in the Democratic Party would really support a Kamala president, a President Harris. Surely they're out of their minds.
Yeah, I don't think she's very popular amongst a lot of people. Maybe among the more left wing of the Democrat Party, but I don't get the sense that a whole lot of moderates are not that much in favor of her, and certainly Republicans aren't.
Not this Republican, anyway. I'll tell you that. I hate her little hyena cackle that she does.
Oh my gosh. Somebody asked, I forget where I was watching it, but somebody played like a montage of her crazy laughs. Oh my gosh, it's so awkward and terrible that it makes me laugh.
Yeah. You'll have to send that to me. I'd get a kick out of that. My favorite
I'll
one.
have to look for it.
My favorite one that's happened recently. I highly doubt we've talked about it on this channel yet, but she was interviewed by Lester Holt, And he says to her, you know, how come you haven't been to the border yet? And she says, well, I haven't been to Europe either.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, you know, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
Well, yeah, I've seen that. Well, first she tries to say, I've been to the border. I've been to the border. I've been to the border. She keeps saying it over and over. And then he presses her on it and says that she hasn't. And then she finally says what you said. Yeah, I haven't been to Europe either.
And she does that cackle.
And she laughs. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yeah.
And it's like, what? I mean,
Like a crazy lady.
well, and it really is crazy too. I mean, because she's border czar, named by President Biden, and she won't even stay on point. I mean, the problem at the border, the problem with these South American migrants has nothing to do with Europe. I mean, what an inappropriate joke. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, and then, recently she went to, she did go to the border. She went to El Paso. And I saw that a lot of people are getting order because she didn't go to some other part of the border.
McCallum. Yeah.
Where situation's supposedly worse.
Well, McCallum's where Trump's going to be. And that,
Okay.
yes, like you said, that's right where the problem is that they're having. But instead she went to El Paso because it was more comfortable. She went with a representative from that area, a Democratic representative.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, from what I heard, it was just sort of safe. She spent more time in the airport than she did at the wall, if you will. And it all tracks. I mean, there are smart people. Jesse Waters is the first one that comes to mind, but there are others too who have said, you know, she doesn't want her picture taken down there because they're looking at, just like we've been talking about, I mean, if Biden kicks the bucket or if he stays in and she actually has to fight for either the presidency or whatever she's going to run for next, she doesn't want to be associated with these problems. She doesn't want to have her picture taken down there, essentially. So I think that makes sense. If you ask, how come she's not there? Well, that makes sense. She doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to be pictured there. Why does she go down in this fashion? Because it was safe. She controlled every aspect of it. She did it with friends. She went to friendly territory, if you will. It's all pitiful.
Right.
I think it makes her look worse than before she went.
Yeah, and one of the things that gets me every time is that they keep blaming the massive influx of migrants on Trump policies.
Yes.
When, sure, there might have been a few surges to the border while he was president, but nothing like what's going on now. So how can he say that is a result of policies you got rid of? This is happening after you got rid of the policies, and during, partly. And they're walking around saying, but it was Trump's policies that caused the problem.
Well, and it's also, I mean, I love what you're saying, because if you listen to the speech that she gave in Guatemala, you know, she's telling the representative, she's telling the Guatemalan population, she's saying, do not come to the United States. You will be turned away.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border.
But you can pull you can pull video of her on the campaign trail saying, same with Biden, that we should welcome these people, that America will welcome these people.
And I think it's very important that when we think about this issue, we understand it in the context of real people and what they are experiencing.
So how do you treat them once they're here?
What you do is you give them the benefit of a process that we put in place a very long time ago, anticipating that there will be people around the globe who will flee harm, who will flee danger and arrive at our shores. And we put in place a process because we said, as Americans, we have strong arms that will embrace those who are being hurt. So we put in place a process to hear their stories, to determine the legitimacy of their stories, and if their story is legitimate, to give them a place of refuge and safety.
What I would do as president is several more things, because things have changed. I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
So, I mean, all the flip-flopping
Right.
comes from one side. And then, yes, I just heard her quoted the other day as well, saying, we inherited a mess. I don't think so. I think you inherited a solution, and it was like in Biden's first 3 days, they started undoing the Remain in Mexico policy. They stopped border wall, building or whatever, construction. And they stopped the Exxon pipeline, or the XL pipeline, excuse me. So, right off the bat, they just started blasting big holes in this just to stay on immigration thing, but it was immediately repeal, repeal, repeal. And that Remain in Mexico policy was one of the most beautiful things that came out of the Trump administration.
Right. It makes sense.
It does make sense, and we won't bore the viewers because I think we've even talked through it, why it does make sense before. If you're fleeing oppression or danger, as soon as you've come to a safe place, you get your, you apply for your asylum. Right. Why do you just get to pick, I'm going to move to Germany because West Virginia sucks? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But anyway, to get off cackling Kamala, there was one other prediction that you had made in that segment, The Sloppy New Year, about big tech. You had talked about how it seemed to your mind that the overreaches of big tech would be more prominent than overreaches of big government in the coming years. And you were kind of concerned about a social audit system, a targeting of private businesses, and you had a particular example of Black Rifle Coffee. Would you want to update us on that? I mean, how is Black Rifle Coffee? You still like them these days?
Yeah, I still get a shipment every couple months. But I think, if I recall, it wasn't necessarily a prediction about companies being targeted, but more of like a bifurcation, more like Republicans are going to go to more conservative companies and stop patronizing, companies that push leftist agendas and stuff like that.
Well, how do you feel in 6 months under Biden? How do you feel about that? Do you think it's moved a little?
No, I don't think it's actually ended up being that much of a thing so far. It definitely still can. Especially as some companies push these woke agendas within their companies. Like, they have people go through these critical race theory trainings and all that stuff. I think if if that keeps up, we'll definitely probably see more. People go to businesses and companies that are more aligned with their ideals. But so far, I don't think it's been as prevalent as I had expected it might be.
Well, I understand the concern, and I heard one of the things that the current administration is pushing for is they want a lot more money as far as funding pumped into the Internal Revenue Service. They want almost a doubling of staff. And, somebody like us, conservatives like us, almost you have to wonder if you remember back to the Obama era, the Lois Lerner testimony up on Capitol Hill, if you remember the targeting of conservative-leaning 501c3s or nonprofit organizations, you look at somebody like Biden doubling the staff, doubling the budget of the IRS, and you almost have to wonder, will they be weaponizing it again? So that just came to my mind as I was listening, and I reheard your former prediction. Maybe it hasn't happened yet in 6 months, but it seems like the wheels are being oiled and the machine is about to be turned on.
Sure. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, because one of the whole big things about what the AG, Attorney General Garland was talking about, was that we need to root out, white supremacy and all these racism and blah 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 stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if if the Department of Justice is going to focus on that, if they don't somehow loop in the IRS to get rid of organizations or companies that they think are pushing quote unquote white supremacy and institutional racism.
Sure they will. I mean, that marriage that you speak of between the Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service, that marriage has been made a lot of times. Let me say, it's been consummated many times. And I think the biggest case that got that marriage going was when they took down Al Capone. All those crimes that he was committing up in Chicago, everybody knew it, but they couldn't get him on everything. His hands were never covered in blood, if you will. You know what they got him for? Income tax evasion. Yeah.
Yep.
Of all things, you think about how many people died at either the hands of Al Capone himself or his hole-in-the-wall gang, or whatever they called themselves. I don't think it was hole-in-the-wall. I can't remember what his gang was called, but
his minions.
Yeah, his minions. But still, all the drugs, all the illegal alcohol, the illegal gambling, I'm sure sex crimes, I'm sure you could just name it. But they got him for income tax evasion. The IRS.
Yep. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if, in the future, like you said, the IRS is weaponized again under the Obama 3.0 administration.
Right. I would not be surprised either. We've seen it before. Nothing came of it last time. They had a few hearings. Lois Lerner sat up there, and I don't know if you'd remember this that well, but I'll never forget it. Darrell Issa was still in the Senate at the time, or I'm sorry, in the House. And he's quizzing her. He led the show. I don't remember what commission it would have been, committee. But he led the show. She comes in and she says, "I am completely innocent of these charges. But My lawyers have advised me to plead the fifth for the remainder of the hearing.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Lois Lerner, and I'm the Director of Exempt Organizations at the Internal Revenue Service. I have been a government employee for over 34 years. I initially practiced law at the Department of Justice and later at the Federal Election Commission. In 2001, I moved to the IRS to work in the Exempt Organizations Office. And in 2006, I was promoted to be the director of that office. Exempt Organizations oversees about 1.6 million tax-exempt organizations and processes over 60,000 applications for tax exemption every year. As director, I'm responsible for about 900 employees nationwide and administer a budget of almost $100 million. My professional career has been devoted to fulfilling responsibilities of the agencies for which I have worked, and I am very proud of the work that I have done in government. On May 14th, the Treasury Inspector General released a report finding that the Exempt Organizations Field Office in Cincinnati, Ohio, used inappropriate criteria to identify for further review applications from organizations that plan to engage in political activity, which may mean that they did not qualify for tax exemption. On that same day, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into the matters described in the Inspector General's report. In addition, members of this committee have accused me of providing false information when I responded to questions about the IRS processing of applications for tax exemption. I have not done anything wrong. I have not broken any laws. I have not violated any IRS rules or regulations, and I have not provided false information to this or any other congressional committee. And while I would very much like to answer the committee's questions today, I've been advised by my counsel to assert my constitutional right not to testify or answer questions related to the subject matter of this hearing. After very careful consideration, I've decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today. Because I'm asserting my right not to testify, I know that some people will assume that I've done something wrong. I have not. One of the basic functions of the Fifth Amendment is to protect innocent individuals, and that is the protection I'm invoking today. Thank you.
And so that's what she did. Every question they asked her, I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. And there was a big question. I don't know if they ever worked it out. But it caused a big fuss. How can you declare you're innocent, basically give testimony? How can you give testimony and then insist that you have a right to not give testimony? So she sits up there and says, I'm innocent, but I'm not going to say anything else. I don't think the way that works, if you plead the fifth, you plead the fifth. You don't say anything.
Right.
So, I think we'd just see more of the same. People just get called up there and say, are you really targeting conservatives? Oh, no, we're completely innocent and we're going to keep pleading the fifth. That's probably what we'd get. But anyway, to talk about a commission like that, a committee, I guess you've probably heard about Nancy Pelosi creating a select committee in the House on the January 6th commission.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't really heard too many details other than she said she was going to start one or did start it.
Well, I do find that even though it's an open question still at this point, she has admitted that there's going to be a select committee, but she hasn't announced who will lead it, who will be on the committee. I think we can certainly assume it's just going to be a left-leaning device. But the January 6th issue is something that we've covered on the channel before, and I never looked it up before going on air, so maybe we don't have an answer to this question, but the Capitol for the longest time had barbed wire fence, and people were being kept out of the Capitol building. They couldn't do chores. They couldn't come up and meet with their Congress people. Is it your understanding that that's the same situation, or has the barbed wire fence come down?
I have no idea. I've not heard.
I'm not sure about that either. So maybe that's not that good of an update. But
Well, I'll say this about her little committee, or whatever she wants to do is, there are already different parts of the government looking into January 6th. I think there's already been some kind of Inspector General's report that just came out recently about it. And I've heard I've heard Republican Congress people make the point that, there's already a body looking into this. We don't need to waste time or money on another one. But yet, the Democrats insist on one. But they're completely satisfied with the WHO being in charge of looking into the coronavirus lab leak in China. They're not interested in any other kind of investigation that Republicans want to do, from our country.
yes, it is interesting. That's why I said just a second ago, I'm sure it'll just be a left-leaning device. I mean, whether it's just manufacture of propaganda or talking points or the opposing view, because I believe there were actually 2 Senate committees that have already looked at this too, and they wrote reports.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it's another example. I know I've talked about it before, but we're living in a postmodern era where you can pick your news. If you want to hear left-leaning news, you go listen to left-leaning news. You want to hear news about puppies, that's all you can find out about. It's just news about puppies. There's a million Facebook pages, there's whatever. It's a sort of pick your own reality that we're living in. And that's what I see this as an overt attempt to put out material that would supply, their side with munitions, basically. So I guess we'll just see what comes of it.
Well, I was just going to say, I might be wrong, but I feel like I've already heard Nancy Pelosi say as much as, they want to find out if or how the white supremacists were the cause of it. And so automatically they're going into it with the mindset of they're looking for a specific perpetrator rather than following the clues that lead them to whatever it might be.
Well, it fits their pattern. I mean, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
This is the Kavanaugh treatment. This is you're guilty until proven innocent,
Right? Yep.
They're looking for a boogeyman when there wasn't one. I mean, you and I, January 6th, 4 days before my birthday, I did not get the president that I wanted. I almost said president. I think I might have had a little Freudian slip there, but I didn't get the present I wanted. That was quite a shock. It's not what I would have liked to have seen that day. But still, I remembered vividly. There were a great number of protesters arrested that day, and many of them were BLM, were Antifa. They weren't right-wingers. So I know that crowd was infiltrated. There were other groups. There weren't just Trump fans there that day. What of their groups? What of all these different groups? They only focus on the white nationalists and the neo-Nazis. That's all you hear them talk about.
Yep. Well, that's all they can seem to focus on.
That's the boogeyman in their closet. Ooh, white supremacy. Yep. It's around every corner. Merrick Garland says that it's the biggest threat to our national, cohesion or whatever. Is white
Security.
supremacy. White supremacy? I don't think that was the biggest national concern back in 1960. How the hell could that be the biggest concern in America today in 2021?
It's not.
Alrighty, well, we'll get off that January 6th thing, and I really only see a couple other things here we could talk about. We had mentioned whether or not they would use some of these COVID funds for other purposes, and I just happened to find it interesting. You know, I sent you a couple of headlines, but they made this effort to defund the police, and it's really bit them in the butt. And now, guess what? They've been using some leftover COVID funds to refund the police. How do you like that one?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And, you know, while we're getting ready for the show, I saw a video that was just from today. There's a Biden administration spokesperson, I can only remember his last name, Richards, who was on the Fox News Sunday show with Chris Wallace. And he was talking about, they were talking about the recent spike in crime and last Wednesday. And this is, I believe this is where the announcement about COVID funding going to police comes from, is that recently Biden had some kind of big talk or announcement about what he's going to do to address the crime issue and stuff in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this guy that was talking to Chris Wallace, I'll do my best to kind of give some quotes of what he said. He said, let's talk about defunding the police. When we were in Congress last year trying to pass emergency relief, an emergency relief plan to cash-strapped cities who were laying off police and firefighters, it was the Republicans who opposed it or objected to it. In fact, they didn't get funding until the Biden Rescue Plan was passed, or the American Rescue Plan, and which allowed state and local governments to replenish their police departments and do the other things that are needed. And he also said Republicans are very good at sticking to the talking points about who defunded the police. And here's the kicker. The truth is, we funded crime intervention and a whole bunch of other things.
Joining us now, senior advisor to the president, Cedric Richmond. Mr. Richmond, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Why does President Biden think the number of homicides and shootings is up so dramatically in the last 18 months?
Well, part of it is the plethora of guns that are flooding the streets of this country, and that's something that the president wants to deal with. He knows the toll that violence takes on families, and especially gun violence, and what it's doing over the last 18 months in this country.
But let's discuss some of the factors that President Biden didn't mention in his speech this week. Take a look at Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Here he is.
The Biden 5-point plan will not address the rise in murder and vicious assaults in this country. We have a lack of prosecution, and we've declared war on the police, and that is backfiring on those who have done it.
Does Senator Graham have a point there?
Absolutely not. In fact, Senator Graham doesn't have a clue. And let's talk about who defunded the police. When we were in Congress last year trying to pass a rescue plan, I'm sorry, not the rescue plan, but an emergency relief plan for cities that were cash-strapped and laying off police and firefighters, it was the Republicans who objected to it. And in fact, They didn't get funding until the American Rescue Plan, which our plan allowed state and local governments to replenish their police departments and do the other things that are needed. So look, Republicans are very good at staying on talking points of who says defund the police, but the truth is they defunded the police. We funded crime intervention and a whole bunch of other things. So I think that this is a very smart, comprehensive approach to dealing with violence in our communities.
And then he later goes on to kind of restate that and said, we funded crime intervention, youth recreation, and other programs like this. And to me, that's the kicker, because he says right before it was the Republicans who defunded the police. And then he turns around and says, we funded, and listed off a whole bunch of other things that aren't the police. And even when Chris Wallace points out that 50 of the largest cities defunded their police departments by 5%, and New York City alone was 15%, this guy, the spokesperson, tries to blame it on the fact that a whole bunch of cities were, cutting their budgets due to COVID and the fact they didn't have, tax revenue and stuff like that. And that made me immediately think about that. I'm pretty sure, and I might be wrong, I didn't get the chance to look, but I'm pretty sure there are clips of Mayor de Blasio talking about defunding the police department when he announced it by something $1 million, I think. And this guy from the administration just trying to blame it on, COVID budget cuts.
Well, it's so funny to me. I mean, there's a good couple of things right there in what you've just said. I mean, first of all, I just hope that the American people have a better memory than the Democrats do. Because the Democrats seem to have a terrible memory. They don't seem to remember that it was talking points from their left side who said this defund the police. They came up with the concept. They talked about it. They paraded it around. It came out of every single one of their, all those 16 or 20 of them that tried to run for president, came out of all of their mouths that we should reallocate funds or we should limit police budgets. They all talked about that on the debate stage. They're the ones who flip-flop. They flip-flop so many damn times you can't keep them straight. And it's funny to hear this fella that you're quoting say that the Republicans are good at sticking to their talking points. Well, you know what the actual truth is Republicans don't flip-flop around. Republicans just stand for the issues they stand for.
Yeah.
One of them would have been not defunding the police.
Right.
So it's preposterous to imagine, that they want to turn around and pin it on us, but,
Right. And then he goes on to try to say the spike in crime is due to all the guns that are flooding the streets. As if, the only cause of homicides lately is gun violence, which I'm sure probably is the majority, but certainly not all of them. And that homicide is the only type of crime that there's been a spike of. I mean, there's been a large increase of other crimes like car thefts and robberies and break-ins and stuff like that too, not just homicides. And how is it a flooding of guns on the street that's causing more carjackings? It's not. It's the fact that because a carjacking is usually considered like a crime of opportunity, I believe. And, somebody's more willing to do it if they believe they're not going to get caught or their repercussions aren't going to be as severe. Not because there are guns on the street.
Well, and it's interesting how, when talking about one issue that they can't fix, they can't address properly, they immediately tie in something from their wish list. They say, oh, well, crime's really bad, and I guess we're getting dinged for that, but, it's not us. It's the Republicans, and crime, it's because of the guns. So, we need to take the guns away. So it's going to lead them right into that. We're going to have to change the gun laws. We're going to have to get harsher on guns. But meanwhile, you have people just strolling into this country through the southern border. And it's like, where are the guns coming from? Is Smith & Wesson just handing them out? Because those are pretty nice machines. I'd like to get one. Who do I have to write to? We'll sponsor Smith & Wesson on this channel, won't we, Reid? Come on.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
think anybody's
Definitely.
just handing them out.
Not at all. And to bring it back to, you were talking about how they're all of a sudden refunding the police with leftover COVID money.
Mm-hmm.
In one of those articles you provided me before the show to look at, I think it was the one from the local news channel.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about wanting to use some of that money for remodeling, I think, like an old courthouse or something to hold people in for misdemeanor offenses, like a misdemeanor jail. Because their local law doesn't allow them to be put in, I guess, the regular jail, if you will. So normally they just have to, release them. And one of the things that came to my mind is, I don't doubt that they might try to spend money on something like that. But it also mentioned that this money is for other type of infrastructure. Some money is fungible. And even though it's, I don't know the recent guidance or law or whatever Biden announced specifically says to use it for infrastructure or police. You can imagine, the money being shifted around and going to a bunch of other boondoggle projects in all these different cities.
Oh, yeah.
So who knows if they'll actually get around to refunding the police as it might be directed or advised.
Well, how about
to do
this?
with
I
the
have a
money.
novel idea about these funds. I mean, why are there so many in the first place?
Yep, I was thinking about that too. Because it's almost like an admission that they
COVID wasn't
gave
that
out-
bad.
Well, that and that they, passed too much money in their budget
Too much
big
money, of course. I mean,
rescue.
I don't
plan,
think it's
whatever
just
it's
from
called.
our point of view. It was way too much money. The $600 unemployment, then they cut it down to $300. It caused this huge problem that we have now with staffing. People can't get a job. Well, it's not that they can't get a job, but I mean, employers can't get somebody to come take the jobs. I mean, I think the first real admission that they had made a mistake was when several states, including our current state of Ohio, decided to cut off the $300 extended benefit for unemployment. That was a big, we fucked up moment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Then you start
I
looking,
think
they're
so.
looking around saying, oh, hey, we're still flush with cash. What can we even do with all this cash? Maybe we should go to the movies. You start thinking, what the heck did they really do to us under the guise of this COVID thing?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it definitely raises all sorts of questions. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. And just to be fair, we're not the first ones to think about that either. I think I've heard many conversations on The Five and on Fox News where they've asked this question. So, I might be stealing it from them subconsciously. I don't have anybody to quote. But I know I've heard other people complain in this same vein of thought, Why is there all this extra money then if they're just looking for extra ways to spend it? And, to pick up there with one other concern, maybe it'll be the last one we discuss on this segment, but, they're talking so hard about pushing this infrastructure bill. And like you were just talking there about how some of these COVID funds can be used for infrastructure, can be used for refunding the police, but at the same time, out of the other side of their mouth, they're trying to pass a $1 trillion infrastructure deal to flood us with more cash. And then what's supposed to immediately come down the pike after the $1 trillion infrastructure deal is they're talking about a $6 trillion Democratic piñata bill that's going to come down the pike afterwards. So if we're already swimming in unused funds and municipalities can put these funds towards, pick something, then why all the need? Why all the push for these other $6 trillion bills?
Well, you'd have to think that they're trying to hide something in it, because they're never willing to just pass piece by piece what needs to get funded now, and what can we agree on needs to be funded now, and what do we need to work out later. They just want to shove money into one big pork barrel bill and shove it all through with random crap in there that nobody ever gets to know about until after it's passed. We get to read it.
Well, see, and I see that interesting, and that's why I'll bring it up, because I'm sure neither of us have sat here and read that $6 trillion bill that they want to pass, but I wouldn't be surprised if exactly what you said is true, that they're trying to hide a bunch of stuff in it. The way I have it written down in my notes is they often bundle popular parts of legislation with very unpopular legislation, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they got everything that we have discussed before. They got their $15 million minimum wage. They got their black people reparations. They got their $10,000 student loan write-off. They got their, I bet you could almost just go write down a little list of Republicans' worst fears, and that'll probably be the bill.
Yeah.
So that's something we might have to update on again at a future point. Because, of course, like I said, we have not read the language of that bill. It hasn't been introduced. It's just still in the planning stages, I think.
Deal making.
Yeah, but definitely a lot to think about there. And the Democrats make themselves plain, in my opinion. You can see what they're pushing for. You can see what motivates them. They always put their blame in the same places. It's the Republicans, it's the guns, it's never them, it's never their policies.
No, not at all.
So, anyway, that's all I have here in my notes. I think it's been a pretty good segment. Just a little update.
Yeah, I think it's been a pretty good episode. We hit on quite a few topics. We brought old topics into new current stuff going on. I think it was quite a good episode.
Well, good. I hope the people enjoyed it too. Hope they'll write to us, let us know, send us lots of coupons. And Smith & Wesson, I'd really love to have a little 38 special snub nose. So if you want to send that to me, we'd be happy to promote you on our channel here.
We'll even make special videos where he's testing it out and demonstrating it.
Yeah, that's right.
Alright. Well, listeners, we hope you enjoyed this show. And if you want to provide us with any feedback, you can email me at contempconserv2@gmail.com. That's CONTEMPCONSERV. 2, at gmail.com.
And similarly, if you're interested in speaking with me, Frank, my email is contempconserv at gmail.com. contempconserv at gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.